Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a privilege to speak in today's debate, and I would like to associate myself with a number of the remarks from honourable members today, and also to say it's a privilege to follow the honourable member from Thirsk and Malton. I was particularly impressed by the speeches by the Shadow Secretary of State, the member for Beckenham, the member for Broadlands, and other colleagues as well. Like many other members, I lost relatives in both world wars, and I found today's debate deeply moving. I wanted to briefly mention one particular relative, my wife's great-uncle, Albert Woodhead, who died in the Somme, aged 19. He has no known grave, and we visited the Thiepval Memorial a few years ago with our family, and it was incredibly moving. My constituency of Reading East, Mr. Speaker, was also deeply affected, like many other members here today, and indeed, like the whole of the UK, Ireland, and indeed the Commonwealth. I'd like to pay tribute to all those men and women who served in whatever capacity in our armed forces, and also, as other honourable members have mentioned, in other roles, such as the Merchant Navy, in munitions factories, and indeed on the wider home front. Mr. Speaker, Britain, I believe, owes a huge debt of honour to the Commonwealth, and indeed to what was then the British Empire, and it's important to remember the bravery and sacrifice not only of British forces, but also all of those who served from Ireland, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Africa, the West Indies, as well as also Australia, Canada, South Africa, and other dominions such as New Zealand. Indeed, 1.5 million men served in the Indian Army alone. Commonwealth and British Empire forces were engaged on a wide range of fronts across the globe. Mr. Speaker, I would like to turn to the effect of the Great War on Reading and Woodley, and also to mention some outstanding local matters. Thousands of people from Berkshire served in many capacities, but in particular I'd like to mention the story of Trooper Potts, who is the only person from Reading to have won a VC. Frederick Potts, who came from the Catesgrove area of Reading, which I used to represent as a councillor, was awarded a Victoria Cross for his outstanding bravery in saving the life of an injured comrade by dragging him to safety from no man's land during extremely heavy fighting in the Gallipoli campaign. Though injured in the thigh himself, Trooper Potts dragged this severely wounded comrade 600 yards on a trenching shovel. Fred Potts ultimately survived the Great War, and he died at the age of 50 in 1943. Arthur Andrews, who he saved, lived until he was 89. Mr. Speaker, this moving story reminds us again of the service and self-sacrifice of the First World War generation. And indeed, as others have mentioned, it's one of so many incidents which we remember today. In my own life, many years later, my son used to play football with one of Trooper Potts' descendants, and I got to know the family well, which was a huge privilege. In this strange way, Mr. Speaker, our history, I think, as we've seen today, is all around us, and for me it's been a personal privilege to take part in this debate and try and commemorate a small part of that history with colleagues from across the whole House. Before I finish, I would like to thank the many organisations which are represented in commemorating this important anniversary, and in particular I would like to mention the Berkshire branches of the Royal British Legion, and also Wokingham and Reading Borough Councils, Woodley Town Council, which has put up an extremely moving display of some of the servicemen from the small town, what was then a small town of Woodley, now a large Reading suburb with thousands and thousands of residents. Sadly, many of those small number of soldiers from this once village didn't ever return. I would also like to thank the many clubs, charities, employers and other organisations who've helped celebrate this important commemoration, and indeed the local historians who've taken part. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.